Hey, thanks, Joe. That was awesome. We're really excited as a longtime user of Windows to get this new version out there. And I think I can speak for all the power users in this room, including myself. More command line love is always a good thing. Now, what we want to talk about next is we're going to transition off of devices, and we're going to start talking about the cloud components as well. Now, the cloud is going to power that exponential growth that we talked about users and devices, apps, and all the data. We're going to be collecting massive, massive amounts of data. And it means we're going to have to also figure out how to deal with that, manage it, and gain insights from it. We're going to have to use advanced functionality, things like machine learning. We're going to have to be able to deploy that and be able to understand how that's going to help us. Now, that's the motivation behind Microsoft Cloud, and in particular the platform components. Now, when we think about Microsoft Cloud, we want to empower every business across every industry in every geography with the cloud. And it's a very expansive version for the Microsoft Cloud. It includes Office 365, Dynamics, as well as Azure. And we're powering all of the cloud systems that we've built. And we've been doing this and building services for over 10 years, empowering that with Azure. And I want to spend some more time talking about the cloud. And we're going to talk about all examples that we have for the cloud today. Now, the next thing I want to do, though, before we get there is let's talk a little bit about how we need to evolve our infrastructure, because I think everyone in here is probably facing a lot of tough questions we have to deal with. We have that massive new data, but we're also being asked to improve agility of everybody here, as well as the people that are using the systems that we've deployed. At the same time, we have to increase and work on security, and we care a lot about data privacy. That's a super important thing for us, our users, as well as our corporations. We also want to be able to reduce costs and at the same time increase flexibility for everyone. I mean, so that's an interesting equation, because when I start balancing for one thing, I may cause tension on something else. Now, at the same time as we're doing all this, the pace of innovation is it's advancing at a dizzying rate. I mean, right now there's a set of workloads that we've learned to run and deploy and optimize, and we've been using those for a long time. They've been very successful. And at the same time, we're getting brand new workloads that are being created to solve these issues with massive amounts of data and scale out and recoverability. Some of these are being designed for the cloud data point. What that means is we're going to have new workloads that are going to be created that we don't even know about yet. And we're going to have to make sure that our infrastructure and processes are able to handle that. Now, I do believe that businesses that are able to navigate this transition are going to be not only just successful, but they're going to thrive in this environment. And in fact, I think we're seeing a lot of disruption in the industry right now, where smaller shops are able to come in and be able to use some of this technology to their advantage. Then we think about what we're doing for the cloud. That means bringing the cloud across the way that you would like it. We start off with one consistent platform. And our options for Microsoft Cloud, especially when we talk about being in your data center, it includes multiple aspects. The first thing is you can bring the cloud into your own data center. You can run a private cloud that you run and you control, and you have full control on top of it. We can also work with service providers. So if you want to work with a trusted partner, or you want to be running in another geography, but you still want to have that kind of ultimate control, then we have service providers that can work on this as well. And of course, we have support for Microsoft Azure. Now, what does a consistent platform mean? At its core, we're using the consistent management framework as well as the virtualization technology that gives you compatibility as you're able to move workloads around. We have common identity with AD and Azure Active Directory, networking and data support as well, in addition to things like development for very common scenarios, things like doing dev tests in the cloud, but being able to do production deployment with my data that I care about. It's maybe privacy data. I can keep that on premises and get the best of both of those worlds. And we do believe that these scenarios are really what people are trying to evolve to. Now, when we think about bringing the cloud, there's three things that we typically talk about, and these are capabilities that we have. It's how we differentiate our value. There's hybrid, hyperscale, and enterprise grade. And we think the combination of these three really produces a very powerful and differentiated experience in the market today. And I want to spend some time going through each of these and explaining what they're about. I want to start off, first of all, with where you're at today. We'll start off with hybrid, because many of us in this room, we're already running data centers. We've got servers running everywhere with workloads on top of them, users and processes in place. And that's where we are today. So what sort of things can we be doing in order to start taking advantage of some of this new technology? Well, it starts off at the base with newer versions of Windows Server and Microsoft System Center. These are things that many of us in this room spend, our days actually working on, tuning, optimizing. And we've been working for several years in a row, many waves of brand new functionality coming out with Windows Server and System Center. We've got new functionality coming out in the next version of Windows Server as well. In particular, we're making key investments in Server around software-defined everything. One of the things you'll see, for example, is a network controller. This is something new that we're building in as a role that you can install in Windows Server, and it gives you the ability to, very cost-effectively, get a network controller in your environment and run it as part of Windows Server. And there's many more support in here, and we have a lot of new functionality that's coming. You can just see all the list of features that we've delivered. Now, we're also moving to a point where many of you are coming off of Windows Server 2003 and R2, and you're ready to move on to the next versions. So take advantage of these new features that are there. And we want to make sure that that is a seamless environment for you, that that's something that you can take control of. This site that we have here has a lot of material that you can use. You can go back and discover, assess, target, and migrate. We're going to help you with that so you can figure out where your workloads are, what they need in order to be able to move forward, and be able to take advantage of that. So I encourage you to take a look at that site and those resources, and we're here to help you with that. Now, one of the other easiest things you can do to get started with the cloud is simply to connect your existing data center and your existing server resources. Now, I can do this with everything I already have. I don't have to make major changes, but by you being able to connect to the cloud, I'm enabling these hybrid scenarios. For example, we recently acquired Image, a company which gives us disaster recovery and failover, and I can use that with the cloud. It also gives me VM mobility, so I can move workloads around. I can use things like Store Simple as a backup device where I can actually install that and be able to take my storage and be able to put it in the cloud where the cost economics are actually very, very good. With disaster recovery, I can actually take my on-premises solution. I can have it fail over to the cloud when I need it, whether I've got a local issue or actually a natural disaster. I can keep my availability up the entire time. We're also going to give you the ability to get insights from the server environment. And the key thing here is these are your machines. This is your data center. It's your hardware. I'm simply enabling this hybrid scenario to get extra advantage out of it. Now, I'm happy to announce today the Azure Operational Insights. It's a new technology that we're bringing out that actually follows this pattern I just described. What we allow you to do is simply install an agent on your existing server machines that we can start uploading with proper scrubbing, your telemetry, your log data, things about how that environment is running. With this data, we can upload it into the cloud, and we can start taking advantage of some of our advanced analytic systems, our HD Insights, our version of Hadoop. And we can actually go in and figure out, how are things running and visualize that data for you. Now, we've also created a set of ready-made intelligence packs. These things handle things like security and capacity planning, change management. And we've built these inside of the products, but also by simply installing the agent, uploading the data, we start giving you all of that intelligence right away. You can also go in and do a fast search and be able to fix incidences that are there that are quickly. So I really think that for all of us in the room, it means we can just, immediately, we've had awesome feedback on this for people that have been helping us test this out. It's really straightforward to get that data up there, and the amount of insight you can unlock is just truly amazing. It's very powerful. We're going to see that in just a second. Now, the next thing we want to do, that was taking our existing servers and data center and just being able to connect and get new power. But also, there's cases where you want to actually be able to take the cloud and the learning that we've had at Microsoft, but bring that to my own data center as well. And the first question is, well, why cloud? I mean, I have my data center. It's up and running. I've got my software. I've got my automation. Things are going. Well, here's the thing. As we move forward, we're evolving into more software-defined everything. Networking was a great example that I just gave. That's a case where having these components built in is going to give you new power and it's going to be cost efficient. But there's also those new workloads I mentioned, workloads that are taking advantage of PaaS and new cloud-oriented systems. We also, with the cloud systems, have really built in self-service and elasticity as part of that. And so that's a great environment, especially from a developer side as we start building out these new workloads. So I do think there's a great motivation for cloud. But again, sometimes you want to have full control, full flexibility, which means I want to run it in my own data center. And that's why we created Azure Pack. This is an Azure consistent version of the Azure software that you can run on your own data center And it includes things like a consistent management portal. In fact, it's exactly the same portal that we run in the public cloud, the same code in both cases. It's also a consistent management API, so I can script against it with PowerShell or write against it with programming. We also have the same hypervisor at the core, and you have many of the features that are there in the public Azure, including infrastructure as a service and a few other options like that. Now, rather than talk any more about this, let's go see all of this new technology in action. And I want to invite Jeff Woolsey up on stage to give us a demo. Jeff.
Thanks, Jason. How's everybody doing? Oh, come on. How's everybody doing? Oh. Excellent. Well, we have some tremendous new technology to demonstrate, and I want to start off right off the bat with a brand new technology called Storage Replica. Storage Replica is storage agnostic, synchronous replication included in the box. With Storage Replica, I can set up standalone servers for disaster recovery. I could do disaster recovery between clusters, or if I'd like to stretch clusters between sites, I can do that and get high availability as well. So let me show you. Here you can see I've got 4 nodes. 2 nodes in New York, 2 nodes in New Jersey. What I want to do is I want to ensure that if for any reason my users can't access the data in New York, that it automatically, transparently fails over to New Jersey without any loss of data, the beauty of synchronous replication. In addition, I'm going to take advantage of a new Azure feature as well called Cloud Witness. To do a stretch cluster, you need to have a vote for the cluster quorum. In the past, this meant extra hardware, extra infrastructure, extra cost. Now we're just making this part of Azure as well, so that's an option to take advantage of the Cloud Witness. As you can see, we're baking hybrid capabilities right into Windows Server. So here is my file server. Here's all where my data resides, and I want to make sure that my users can easily access this. And again, I want this to be available in the case of for failover. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go in here, I'm going to access the file share data, and I'm going to enable replication, which is going to bring up this easy-to-use storage replication wizard. I'm going to select my source log disk. I'm going to select my destination storage volume. I'm going to select my destination log disk. And literally, in just a few clicks, that's it. I've gone ahead and I've set up synchronous replication. Setting up synchronous replication has never been this easy before. And again, it's storage agnostic. It works with any storage that you have out there. Doesn't require SANs. In fact, like I said before, it works with standalone servers. And just like that, we are finished and ready to do failover from one site to the next. Now, the key there is easy. Well, speaking of easy, wouldn't it be great if you could harness the power, the scale, the data analytics, the knowledge that we have in Azure, and be able to package that up and give that to you so that you could run your own data centers, your own infrastructure as efficiently as possible? Well, we think so too. That's why we're introducing this brand new Azure service, Microsoft Azure Operational Insights. Azure Operational Insights collects, combines, correlates, and then visualizes all of this infrastructure data in this very easy-to-use interface here. For example, you can see each one of these tiles is an intelligence pack. Let's start with a very common issue in infrastructure, change tracking. How do you know what's changed? Is so much change occurring that you can't even track it? Where would you go? Are you going to be looking through log files to find it? Well, with change tracking, we're going to find all that information and surface it up to you easily so you can see those changes by configuration type. You can see over the last week just what has changed. I can see software changes. I can see application changes, service changes, all very easily without having to go trolling through logs. We're surfacing this data and providing this insight. Another area, what about threat management? Well, from a malware assessment standpoint, I can see that immediately I've got 9 servers with inadequate protection, so I've got some work to do there. From a patching and system update standpoint, you can see I've got 12 servers missing security updates. Again, readily available. All I did was install an agent, and this data starts streaming and flowing to me. So all of this very readily available. Now, personally, one of my favorites, capacity planning. How often have you wondered, how much storage do I have? How much compute do I really have? How much memory do I have? How do I know if I'm going to make it to the next budget cycle without actually running out of resources? Engineering has a whole bunch of new projects planned. Can we actually provide the resources needed? Well, with capacity planning, we're looking and tracking all of your historical usage so we can project those and give you what-if scenarios. You can see right here, oh my goodness, I only have 8 days left before I hit capacity on my virtual machines. I've got some work to do here. You can see here from a storage perspective, I look okay. From a compute perspective, my cores are fine, but my memory is actually pretty low. I only have about 28% of memory. Let's dive into this further. Wow. Look at all of the analytics being presented here. Look at all the cores, averages, ratios, hotspots. Look at memory. Oh, I can see what's going on here. This shows me now, as I feed into the projection tool, wow, okay, now I know what my issue is. I really need to start looking at my memory. So what's really underlying operational insights, of course, is search. As you search, we want to make sure we can easily find and give you the remediation to fix any issues that come to mind. And one of the best ways to do that is to provide you your own personalized dashboard. Because we know that there are going to be some things that are important to some of you and maybe not to others. Well, guess what? I love this. Because you can look across many different vectors simultaneously. It's not just CPU usage and memory, it's high disk read latency, it's memory utilization by virtual core, it's firewall policy settings, it's SQL backup errors. You decide what you want to put here, and you can make this and customize this to be your own personal dashboard. So this way, you can run and take the knowledge that we have from Azure, give it to you so that you can run your operations, your infrastructure more efficiently than ever. Now that we've shown you how to do that, let's talk about how you can manage your infrastructure in an Azure consistent way with the Azure Pack. So the Azure Pack has been one of the hottest releases at Microsoft. And the Azure Pack allows you to, built on top of Windows Server and System Center, allows you to create your own Azure consistent clouds. So what you're looking at right now is the IT admin portal. Okay, so I'm the person that can create runbook automation. I can create portals, I can create plans, I can create automation, I can create services so that my tenants internally in my infrastructure can consume those. Let me show you what a plan looks like. So here I've got a TSP plan, and this TSP plan consists of PaaS websites, PaaS SQL servers, PaaS MySQL servers, IaaS virtual machines. So let's take a look at our virtual machine clouds. And you can see, again, this is all using my on-premises infrastructure. This is my hardware that I'm managing. In fact, here's my System Center Virtual Machine Manager server, so you can see that. I can establish quotas and establish usage limits to make sure that somebody can't just start firing up resources willy-nilly. This is limited to 10 virtual machines, 100 cores, 20 gigs of memory. Further on down, you can see that I can do things like assign images to the gallery. And it's not just plain operating systems, it's operating system with services and applications running. For example, web server, Exchange server, or SQL server. So this is the admin side where I actually create those plans. Let's switch now to the tenant side. So this is where your users actually log in, and you can see, again, PaaS websites, PaaS SQL Server databases. I can create Hyper-V network virtualization, networks here as well. I'm going to go into virtual machines here, and you can see that I've got a number of virtual machines available. What's interesting to point out is these aren't just plain vanilla virtual machines. These are virtual machines configured as roles. And what that means is it's a little bit more than just a plain OS. It's actually configured with services and applications, domain controller, Exchange server, SQL server, all ready to go. So instead of your folks internally having to just check out an OS and then install a bunch of apps, you already do that and provision it. In fact, you can see I've got SQL Server domain join. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Rather than go through the process of creating one, I've already created this web server here. And you can see it's got a core, it's got memory, it's got storage. And over time, you know what, I'm going to want to be able to scale this. So I could scale it up. And the way I could do that, I could simply go in here and say, let's give it some more memory, let's give it some more cores. But what I really like to do is I want to take advantage of cloud, and I really want to scale out. This gives me more resiliency as well. So I'm going to go ahead and add the instance count, click Save, click Yes, and just like that, I'm adding a new instance on the fly and scaling this out all on my own infrastructure with the Windows Azure Pack. So think about what you've seen here. You've seen storage replica, which gives you storage-agnostic synchronous replication. You've seen Azure Operational Insights, and you've seen the Windows Azure Pack. These are very powerful cloud technologies. This is the Microsoft Cloud. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Now, we wanted to go one step further than this because you just saw Azure Pack running on your own hardware. But one of the things I've also found in talking to people is that going off and creating your own private cloud implementation can sometimes be tricky. I mean, sometimes you're working with vendors that are giving you, software. They're trying to figure out which direction they're going to take it, and you have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to operationalize it. So we wanted to take the learning that we've done not only on the software but also on the hardware side. And so we've just announced our cloud platform system. Now, this is a Azure consistent cloud in the box. It's an appliance that's fully integrated with the hardware and the software pulled together. We think this is going to give you the ability to adopt the cloud with even greater control. Now, what this means is by the time you order the Azure appliance, this CPS device, you're going to be able to have it delivered, you energize it, you hook it up to your network, and you're basically good to go. You're right at the point where Jeff was showing you of creating plans and being able to get that thing up and running. So you don't have to spend the time trying to integrate the two. And we've done all the work over the last couple of years, actually, to go build this hardware, this knowledge, and integrate these things together. We think it's an incredibly easy and straightforward way to get going, but it's also incredibly powerful. Now, in order to show you the advantages you get out of this, I'd like to take one of our partners that worked with us and show you an example of how they're using CPS. Let's go ahead and roll the video.
If you look at Capgemini and if you look at the evolution of where our clients are going and where technology is going, cloud plays a very important part. Cloud for us is about the ability of rapid application deployment, being able to innovate with clients, but also being able to bring the right workload to the right cloud at the right time. CPS is a privatized cloud on our premise that looks and feels very similar to the cloud that Microsoft Azure has out in the public domain. We don't lose the intrinsic attributes that we were able to gain in the public domain, and we're now able to run it in a very secure manner. What that means is better, faster, cheaper for our clients. SkySight for Capgemini is all about taking Microsoft's CPS system and then building value-added services on top of it.
SkySight is a hybrid solution where we will deliver a complete integrated application store and a development studio, all using Microsoft technologies.
CPS enables Capgemini to bring market mover advantages to our clients through the use of the public environments and then the ability to rapidly bring ideas to market for our customers. We're able to provide those services in a much more consistent manner at a lower price point to our customers as well.
Every customer actually wants to move to cloud. CPS, for me, is the integrated platform for public and private cloud. Actually, it's the ideal platform to deliver the hybrid solution. That is what the customers are looking for.
So we're really excited about CPS, and we're partnering with Dell in order to provide this first version of the CPS appliance that we have available for that. Now, we've actually got the unit over in the expo hall, so I encourage you, when you have time here at the conference, head over to the Microsoft booth over there. You'll be able to actually see CPS in person, as well as get demonstrations of all the things that you can do with it. Now, we wanted to take this as well, and so now that we have this solution, we know that sometimes what you want to do is to be able to work with a hosting partner. You may not actually be running your own data center, or there's cases where you need data centers in other locations where you don't have one, but you're going to work with a partner on that. So we've also created the Cloud OS Network. It's a network of hosting and service providers worldwide. We have over 100 partners in the Cloud OS Network, and half of them are here in Europe. Now, these partners represent over 600 data centers worldwide. 1/3 of those are actually located here in Europe. And they're basically helping over 3.7 million customers every day. And so the CPS device that you saw there or other environments can be enabled, and those partners can enable that for you. That gives you the ultimate control over where your cloud solution is going to be. That means no matter where you live or where you work, we've got you covered. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is to move into this next capability. It's called hyperscale. Now, hyperscale really recognizes the fact that over the last, actually several decades, Our industry has really been defined by the scarcity of resources. We do a lot of work in order to manage how much capacity we have, how well we're using it. Sometimes we'll wind up over-provisioning in order to make sure that we have enough, but then we wind up with a utilization problem. It's really been, in that environment. And this cloud design point is actually saying, hey, what if you could flip that on its head? What if you could say, look, I don't care. I've got petabytes of storage. I've got tens of thousands of compute cores that I'd like to use, but I don't need them the entire time. And hyperscale really reads on that. Now, for Azure, one of the important things for hyperscale is having a global footprint. And what you're seeing on this map, every little circle here is an Azure region, composed of multiple data centers. And in fact, yesterday we just made our Australia data center available for the public to go use, and that brings us up to 19 regions. Now these regions are, we have regions capable of running up to 600,000 servers. That's an amazing amount of capacity when you think about it. And just to put that in perspective, that's nearly 2 times the number of regions that you can get with Amazon Web Services, and it's 6 times the number of regions that you can get with Google and their public cloud. Also, the immense scale that we're running on this really gives us scale economics. That means that we can afford to continue to cut our prices, and we can pass those savings on to you. Now, over the last 12 months, we've shipped over 300 new features into the Azure public cloud. This includes infrastructure improvements, but also higher-level services like live streaming media and Azure machine learning. Now, we've been able to also include new technology, both the SQL as well as NoSQL options with, for example, DocumentDB. And we've had amazing growth with this. Right now, we are storing over 30 trillion, with a T, storage objects in the Azure storage system. We have over 1.2 million SQL databases that are hosted in the environment. We have 350 million Azure Active Directory users. And as you know, about 95% of the enterprise's identity is in Active Directory, and Azure Active Directory allows us to be able to federate those two, so I can use it in the cloud. And we actually process 18 billion, with a B, authentications every week with Azure Active Directory. Every time you hit Office 365, you're going through that path. We've also registered over 2 million developers with Visual Studio Online, and that's a service that we've launched less than 12 months ago. So we're very excited about the momentum that we have here, and it's another example of that pace of innovation bringing into the cloud. And as we bring that in, we'll continue to take that experience and bring that along into our private cloud solutions as well. Now, we also want you to have very powerful VM combinations to run new workloads. So we just announced our G family of virtual machine sizes. Now, this one is optimized for data workloads. We have up to 32 CPU cores, 448 gigabytes of RAM, and 6.5 terabytes of local SSD. It's all running on the latest Intel processors. Now, this thing's a monster. It's actually the biggest virtual machine size that's available out on the market. Now, to give you a feeling for that, that's 2 times the amount of memory that you can get from the largest AWS VMs, and it's 4 times the largest Google VMs that are available today. So it really is the biggest one that's out there today. We've also just announced support for Azure Premium Storage. And Azure Premium Storage gives you durable storage for your virtual machine. We can actually go up to 32 terabytes per storage for each of the VMs that you have, and we can deliver that with over 50,000 IOPS per VM. And we're going to do that with a very fast, less than 1 millisecond read latency. I really think that this combination of these large VM sizes and premium storage gives you an opportunity to run workloads that maybe today you're thinking, I really have to run them on bare metal. But we believe you're going to be able to take advantage of this and be able to speed them up and actually take advantage of the public cloud in this case as well. I'm also happy to announce today Azure Batch Preview. Now, Azure Batch is a new service that we are releasing just now into preview. It's job scheduling as a service, and we can do massive scale with this service. Now, what this allows you to do is take advantage of compute cores so that rather than you having to do a lot of work and write a lot of plumbing for virtual machine pools, instead we'll do that for you. We'll do the job scheduling, we'll do all of the auto scaling required for that, and you don't have to concentrate on that plumbing. Now, in particular, the useful thing about that is that, since you're running in Azure, no matter how many cores you're using, you just pay per minute for those VMs of what you're actually going to consume. So we think that in that case, you get very good cost effective, and it allows you to be able to scale up and scale down and just pay for what's required. Now that we have all the system, we also want to have an open ecosystem that we can run this content on. And Azure's always been an open ecosystem that includes the operating systems you run, the languages that you write in, or the runtimes that you have, and other workloads that are available to you. We recently announced a strategic partnership with Docker, a brand new technology that is very popular for writing new applications, especially in the cloud. Now, that includes support for containers on Linux, and in fact, we have support already when Docker released earlier this year. So you can already run Linux containers with Docker orchestrating those. But we've also announced that we're bringing container technology to Windows Server. So no matter whether you're using Linux or using Windows Server in the future, you'll be able to use Docker to do the orchestration of those. You'll be able to integrate well with the Azure Gallery and into the Docker Hub, and you'll have great workloads there. And we're very excited about that, and we are executing as a first-class member of this open source community led by the Docker team. Now, Linux is also an important thing for many workloads that you might be running. In fact, 1 out of 5 virtual machines that are created on Azure today are actually running Linux, and we see more and more coming forward. We just announced the support for CoreOS, a new Linux distro running and being certified on top of Azure. CoreOS is a container-optimized version of Linux with a minimal footprint on it, which makes it great for deploying workloads. We think this container technology is going to be a great way to get great density and also to increase productivity around development of new cloud scenarios in the future. Now, we have, basically 10,000 new customers joining with Azure every week, and you can see some awesome examples that we have here being able to use the public cloud. I want to talk about 2 cases in particular that I think are very interesting. The first one is Paul Smith. And Paul Smith is a British fashion designer in a retail group. They basically have a classic IT shop, and they open 4 to 5 new retail locations every year. In this particular case, Paul Smith has decided to use a hybrid scenario. They run their own data center, but they can actually do disaster recovery up into the cloud. And that means that no matter what issues they may have, they can do the failover, and they can keep the availability up for their operations. I also want to talk about Towers Watson, which is a global professional services firm. Now, they specialize in making software and insights available to insurance companies in 2 things, particularly modeling risk and making sure you're complying with financial regulations. Now, the next version of their application, the risk management financial modeling, is built on top of Azure Batch. Now, what that means is, again, they can concentrate on the business value of this insurance business that they're working on and not have to worry about that plumbing piece. That means that they can go after large customers that may want to run tens of thousands of cores for a job. Again, jobs that may take today hundreds of hours to complete, I can get them done in just a few hours in the public cloud. And because we have this massive scale, you never have to say no to a customer. We have that, you can use it, and when you're done with it, you can actually just dial it back down and just pay for what you actually use. So that increases the number of clients that you can actually work with, customers that are large and customers that are small that may not be able to afford their own systems. So it really does spread that out, and we're very excited about that. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at some of this new technology I just described. I'd like to invite Mark Rasinovich on stage to give us a demo. Mark.
Good morning, everybody. So the first demo I'm going to show you is to highlight the scale-out capabilities of Azure Batch. And to do that, I thought I'd show you the limitations you run into when you scale up versus scale out. The application I'm going to open here is called Blender. It's an popular open source 3D modeling and rendering application, and I've loaded a model into it. What you're looking at looks like just some gray blocks with a cylinder. These are actually going to be ice cubes with a glass, and what this rendering job is going to do is do some cool ray tracing effects to have lights come through those translucent objects. To show you the limits of scale up, I'll start this rendering job here on this local system. And you'll see that it's a little bit like watching paint dry, the speed of this thing filling in. What we've done is, because this application is so popular, is integrated it with Azure Batch by writing a plugin for it, which is over here on the right side. Using this plugin, you can easily take rendering jobs like this and submit them up to the Azure Batch service. One of the things you do when you configure it is specify the number of infrastructure as a service instances, or the VM instances that you want that job to render into. You see I've specified 37 here, and these are going to be A8 size virtual machines, which are 8-core, high compute intensive virtual machines with InfiniBand networking. The reason that I specified 37 is that the plugin is going to take that rendering job and slice it into a 6x6 grid for a total of 36 tasks, with one final task that's going to stitch those images together to create that final image. I'll submit the job now by clicking on it. And right from here, again in the plugin, you can look at the job status. So this is the job that I just submitted. You can see it's already cranking along, and it's got 36 tasks with 37 virtual machines scheduled to run. But you can also go directly, if you want to more detail about what's going on with that job, from the plugin is jump right to the Azure Batch portal and see the status of the job and the tasks within it. So this is the job that just is kicked off. If I click this open, we'll see the individual tasks executing. And for each task, you can see a nice graph up here. This is task number 30 of its usage of CPU, RAM, and I/O as it executes. You can see the time that it took each of these tasks to complete. And you can already see that this final task, the merge task, is just about to finish. If you want to take a look at the execution history of all those tasks and what they were doing, this job log here will show you that what was going on is these individual images, like image 10, was being uploaded to Azure storage. And then that final task is taking, like I said, all those 36 images and stitching them together. And that job should be complete now, which it is. And the job output now is ready with the final rendered image in Azure storage that we can download directly from the web and open it up and see our beautiful rendered picture. And there it is. Now let's go back and take a look at that, how the local machine is doing. And you can see it still has got a ways to go. So we're going to sit here and wait for that to finish and then move on. I'm just kidding. Let's stop that and move on to the next demo. So that was taking advantage of the scale out, about 300 cores we use there. For this next demo, I'm going to show you some of the elasticity that containers give you on Azure with the CoreOS Linux distribution that Jason mentioned. Because CoreOS is now part of our marketplace, you can come to the marketplace here, the gallery here, find CoreOS, and launch an instance right on top of Azure, and then deploy Docker containers into it very easily. Now, most people manage their Docker containers from Linux because Docker is natively written for Linux. What I'm going to show you for the first time ever in public is Docker Client for Windows. This Docker port to Windows will let you manage your Linux Docker containers from your Windows systems. And in the future, it will let you manage your Windows containers also from your Windows systems. This command is the command that I ran just a little while ago to create what's called a Docker host. A Docker host is a virtual machine or server that's managed by the Docker client and into which you can deploy Docker containers. You can see that the name of this host is Azure CoreOS 1. And that's going to be the DNS name that we've got for the virtual machine in Azure that was created. If I execute just Docker host, this will show me the Docker hosts that are under management by this Docker client. There's 3 of them that you're going to see, including that Azure CoreOS 1 host that I created earlier. And that one will be marked as the active one, which means that when I execute Docker client commands here, they're going to be targeting that Docker host. And you can see here the DNS name that I mentioned, Azure-CoreOS 1. The first thing I'll do is create a container right from here into that Linux machine. It's a Linux Ubuntu container, and it's going to run a command, the Azure Bash command, the Linux Bash command, and then connect to that Bash command. So I'm connected into that Docker container running in that CoreOS virtual machine in Azure, and if I execute a Linux command like ps, that will show me the processes that are active inside of that container, which, because it's in a container and it's isolated from the rest of that Linux OS, it can't see the rest of the Linux processes, just the ones running in its own container. The next thing I'll show you is just how easy it is to launch images from the Docker Hub into those Docker containers, and how fast Docker execution or container execution is. First, I'll show you that that Linux virtual machine up in Azure has no active website on it. I've gone to it in the browser, and there's nothing listening. Using, again, the Docker Windows client, I'll create a WordPress site using the WordPress image from the Docker Hub, connect it to a MySQL database container that's already executing in that CoreOS host, and have it listen on port 80 by default. Give it a second, press refresh, and there it is, my WordPress site where I can blog about TechEd, active up in that virtual machine. And that's the power of the integration of the Docker Windows client with CoreOS on top of Azure and Docker containers and Docker Hub. For the final demo, I'll give you a look at our premium storage capability. And to do this, I thought it'd be interesting to contrast it with our standard storage capability. I've got 3 virtual machines. This one has a standard storage disk attached to it. And I've got a tool here called Iometer, which is a disk stress test tool. And it's going to hit that disk with a bunch of load, read and write load, and then show us in a nice speedometer the IOs per second that it's able to achieve. You can see that it's hovering between 500 and 600, which makes sense because the standard storage service delivers about 500 IOPS. And so we would expect to get that. This second virtual machine is on one of our new D-series VMs, and I've connected a premium storage disk to it. Again, the same stress test. I'll launch the test, open up the speedometer. You can see now I'm getting 4,000 IOPS, which is the performance of a single premium storage disk. But Jason mentioned in the slide we could deliver up to 50,000 or more IOPS using the premium storage service. To show that, I've got another virtual machine here, another D-series, but instead of one premium storage disk attached to it, I've got 16 disks attached to it, and I've striped them. So they appear as one 16 terabyte premium storage disk for the stress test program. And when I launch the stress on it, open up the speedometer, you can see that it's actually more than 50,000. It's close to 60,000 IOPS we're getting. This demonstrates how you can take your scale-up workloads now into a platform like Azure and really get the performance that they need to excel on the Azure platform. And this 60,000 IOPS is the highest throughput of any storage service in the public cloud today. So with that, I've showed you containers, I've showed you the scale-out capabilities, the easy scale-out capabilities of Azure Batch, and finally the scale-up capabilities now we've got with our premium Azure storage. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Jason. I hope you have a great TechEd.
Great. Great, thanks, Mark. So you just saw the advantage of hyperscale in several different examples. Now, we think that there's probably only going to be 3 public cloud vendors that can run with this kind of footprint. It's going to be Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. Now, our intent here is to be able to differentiate, though, on the capabilities that we're describing. That means, for example, the hybrid scenarios that we also showed you. None of the other guys have that. In addition to enterprise grade. Enterprise grade is very important for us. It really relates to our security and compliance work. It includes things like being able to run at very high resiliency. On the compliance side, we think about things like Article 29 support, especially here in the EU. And we'll talk about more compliance later in another session. Now, the other thing we want to do with enterprise grade, though, is look at the breadth of the offerings we have. In spring, Gartner updated their Magic Quadrants for enterprise application platform as a service, cloud infrastructure as a service, public cloud storage services, and x86 virtualization. Now, Microsoft is a leader in all 4 of these, and in fact, we're the only vendor that's actually a leader in all 4. And again, part of this is because we really are trying to do a breadth of technology for you that gives you those options we talked about, all this private cloud, public cloud, everything in between. And this really demonstrates the value that we're delivering with that. Now, we talked about connectivity before, but we also want to make sure that you can do that in a secure and a robust and a resilient way. And so earlier this year, we shipped ExpressRoute. And ExpressRoute allows you to extend your data center to Azure And you can use over 16 worldwide locations and growing. We can add more and more all the time. And in fact, you probably will see your networking provider is already up on this list, and if not, we're probably working with them. More will come along the way. This gives you a high bandwidth, low latency connection between your data center and the Azure public cloud. I can put a VPN around it. I can have full control. I can put domain servers and really anything else that I want. I can just treat it like a natural extension of my existing data center. Now, we provide this with an enterprise-grade resiliency. That means we give you 2 circuits. You can back up between them and make sure you have good availability. And we back that up with a connection uptime SLA of 99.9. And just to put that in context, today, Amazon has 12 locations, and Google does not have an offer like this. But we think this is a critical offering in order to be able to enable this hybrid and this connected environment. Now, we're also happy to announce today that the Azure Marketplace is available. We've got a lot of partners that are working already, and it is part of the gallery, and you can get their images there. Now, Azure Marketplace is a case where we've come and back and made it much, much easier to go in and be able to browse and find things like virtual appliances, virtual machines that are already pre-configured, applications and services that you'd like to run. And we think this combination of bringing together these solutions that ISVs are creating to solve problems that we have, especially in the enterprise, that's a win-win for both of us. Now, the Azure Marketplace, as of today, and literally today, is now open for business with a set of curated offerings that are there. We make it super simple to get it up and running through VM extensions and other mechanisms, so you can get very, very fast deployment times with this. Now, you'll probably even see some names inside of this list that you wouldn't even expected us to have worked with on Azure. But part of what we're also trying to do is make sure that you have choice, and that for services and products that you're already using, that you have access to those, and it works in a first-class way. So we're very excited to have the Marketplace available out there. Go check it out. Now, this wraps up our conversation on the platform side of this. We've talked through devices, and Joe showed us some great features, and we've walked through all the cloud value props and what it means to pull these two things together. What we want to be able to do now is transition, because having all this infrastructure, that's great, but in the end, what we're really trying to do is enable users and new scenarios to show up. That enables that productivity that we talked about before, that productivity for individuals, for teams, and for business processes. So we want to be able to talk about what does that look like for those users? What do we need to be able to develop? But I want to talk a little bit first about what kind of trends we're seeing and what environment we need to operate in. Now, really, the world has changed. I mean, again, we talked about all these connected devices. The expectations of our users now is that they're a global workforce. I'm going to be able to be connected anywhere that I go. I'm going to have access to my resources, and I want to be able to do that, basically everywhere. We really have to make sure that our operations and our IT software solutions can keep up with that pace, because that really is what our user base is demanding. Now, our workforce is also changing. We're at a point where the new workforce that is entering today and leaving university and coming to work with us, they probably have never known a world that didn't have touch screens for smartphones in addition to tablets. And they work in a very collaborative environment. It's a social thing that they do today, but they're also expecting to have some of those same environments for collaboration amongst their teams. So they're constantly connected. They're looking for this environment to be a collaborative space. They want to be able to have and discover information quickly instead of being stuck in systems where I can't actually find what I need to be successful. Now, I'm also bringing my devices with me, and I use it all day long. It's part of my life. It's part of my work. I have the same phone all day, whether I'm at a party with my friends or I'm actually in a meeting, actually trying to pull up a PowerPoint or a Word document. So we really need to have something that's going to give us that experience. But the thing about this is that it's great, but it also introduces new risk, because this person has unfortunately left their smartphone on the metro. They've got their contact information in there. They're probably going to lose that, but that can also have confidential corporate information on it as well, and that represents a problem. Every year, millions of smartphones are stolen or lost, and we have to figure out what that looks like. How do you prevent that data from getting compromised? Now we get into this balancing act, which is how do I make sure that I have a great user experience that matches what I would like to have as an end user, so it doesn't feel like it's intrusive and it feels like it's just a normal part of my tools that I use every day, but at the same time exercises that control that we want to have. Now, when we think about this, we believe that the solution for this is to be able to implement security in multiple layers. That includes, for example, being able to manage the physical device itself and understand and set policies around how that device works. And you saw a little bit of this with Joe, and we'll show a little bit in just a moment. But we also want to have great applications that I want to be able to use. I want to use the native apps, for the data that I created, because that gives me the highest fidelity experience. But I also need to control the app to make sure that it's not able to leak confidential data. I also care about the files that are underneath of that, because at the end, that is the data that we're really trying to protect. And we want this entire thing to be backed up with an identity system that can really be the substrate for this entire thing. We want to be able to pull this together, and today some vendors will go as far as devices and they'll create applications, but they may not do all of these layers, and we believe we have an excellent solution for all of this. Now, our solution starts off by being able to manage the devices that you want to use with support for Android and iOS, as well as, of course, Windows. On top of that, we build our identity system with Azure Active Directory, and again, that base that we talked about before of our enterprise users. And we provide a couple of solutions. One, Enterprise Mobility Suite, or EMS. And this gives me the ability to have software to go manage those applications, device policy, and all of those things related to that. And then also Office 365, because it is the premier application for productivity, and I want to be able to use it, but again, have this flexibility around security. Now, we've had tremendous interest in Enterprise Mobility Suite in the enterprise. In fact, we've grown our end user base by over 400% in the last year, and it continues to just skyrocket. So I think this solution that we're providing is actually proving to be very popular and very successful. So we're happy to announce today that we have new Microsoft Intune updates that are coming to you over the next several months. These updates are going to allow you to do things we just talked about, like manage my devices. For example, I want to be able to manage Office 365 on my iPad and have control over that. I want to be able to set policies around those apps on those devices so I can actually decide how am I going to interact with it and how does my data work. In addition to that, we want to figure out how your applications work with data, so things like copy and paste and other metaphors like that, and making sure that my data continues to stay secure. That gives everybody here control over that environment. We also want to propose the MDM solution for Office 365, mobile device management. And in this case, again, Office 365 is a premier application. We want you to be able to do the administration tasks around that and the data and documents associated with it. We're going to allow you to do that directly from the Office 365 admin portal. We can also set conditional policy on your applications and the most important parts, your docs and your email. Now, how can you access that data and what policy do we have in there? And if you do get to the place where that device that was on the Metro actually gets lost and you need to deal with it, then we're going to give you solutions that allow you to do a remote wipe of that corporate data while keeping the user data intact. And so that handles a number of scenarios that you may run into. And we think this combination of these Intune updates and the support for Enterprise Mobility Suite, as well as the new MDM support for Office, it really is a no-compromises solution. It gives you the best of those applications as well as the control, great for the end user experience, and it's great for our IT professionals. So what I'd like to do next is let's go ahead and take a look at some of this functionality. I'm going to invite Julia White up on stage to give us a demo. Julia.
Jason. All right. Now, Jason talked about security across 4 layers: identity, devices, apps, and data. So that you can be, and the importance of being productive and secure across all of your devices. So I'm going to show you some recently released technology, as well as some coming in the near future, to help you manage all of your devices in a secure way. And that's working across Azure Active Directory, Intune, and Office 365. So again, you can meet your security requirements, but also enabling that great end-user experience. Now, one of the first things you need to do when you're starting to manage a cloud app is get your directory connected. So something like getting started with Office 365. And that gets your on-premises directory connected to the cloud. And I work with a lot of Office 365 customers, and they've told me, and us in the past, this has been a reasonably complicated experience. Well, now I'm thrilled to say that is no longer the case. Thanks to Azure Active Directory Connect, you can literally get your cloud directory connected to your on-premises directory in 6 clicks. So you get that security and access control and single sign-on experience. But don't take my word for it. Let's take a look here in the Connect tool. And essentially, this is a single download that addresses everything you need to do to get your directory connected to the cloud. Essentially, it automates that process that used to be relatively complex. So here in the wizard, I just go ahead and agree to the terms. That simple. Keep going. And it's going to check and see what prereqs I need and install those for me. And then I just have to add in my credentials here to connect to my cloud directory. And it'll load that. And I'm just going to go ahead and use my Express settings, keep it simple. And now I will, let me grab my on-prem creds here. So here's my Windows 80 credentials. Now it's reviewing that, and literally, with this click, it's going to perform that configuration and connect my cloud directory with my on-premises directly. That simple. So much easier than it used to be. So I can now manage my cloud-based apps as well as have single sign-on experience. So really awesome compared to what it used to be on that front. Now, once I have Azure Active Directory set up, I can manage all of my cloud-based apps and have the benefits of security, auditing, reporting, all in one place. Well, now you can extend that same experience to your on-premises apps as well, because increasingly you're managing both on-premises as well as cloud-based apps, and you want that single control plane for all of your apps. Well, now with the new Azure Active Directory App Proxy, you can actually bring those on-premise apps right into Azure AD, so you have that single control plane. So let me show you an example of that. So I have this SharePoint site. It's running on-premises. Maybe I have some fully trusted code or something, so I'm not ready yet to move it to Office 365, but I want to connect it to my Azure AD. Well, now I can just do that very simply. So if I go into my AD portal here, into my, or Azure portal, into my AD area, you can see this is where I manage my users, my groups, and my applications. Well, now I want to add that SharePoint app that I have. Just go down here and add it, and I can just publish it directly. And I'm going to call this my Point on-prem site. And let's see, go there, check it out. All right, and then I just let it know where it's sitting, and it checks. So there, literally with that, I've taken that on-premises app and I've published it up and connected it with my cloud directory. So let me show you now, flip over to the end user experience. So you can see that now I get that single experience for them as well. So as a user, I go to one place to get all of my access to all of my cloud apps, but also to my on-premise apps too, like this SharePoint site that I just loaded into it. So if I go over to my iPad now, flip over here. Make sure I get that shown. All right, great. And here I'm in my apps site, and I can just click down here at the bottom. You'll see I have that SharePoint on-prem site that I published. And if I load that up, let me log in first, of course. Good to have the security. All right. Now let's get that loaded. There we go. There's that team site that I just published. So again, giving the user's experience a really nice single place to get all of their apps as well. Now, I just showed you how simple it is to get your directory connected and get your app proxy set up. So now you can get your users, your groups, your cloud-based apps, and your on-premise apps all managed by and connected to Azure Active Directory. So that covers really quickly what we can do across identity. Now let's talk about device and app security. Now, Jason announced some great new Intune capabilities coming. I'm going to show you the mobile application management aspect coming in the next few months, because users want access to all their important information, particularly email and Office documents, so they can be productive everywhere. Well, and also, since we've shipped the Office for iPad apps, we've had a lot of feedback asking for people to be able to manage those apps. And I'm thrilled that Intune will be uniquely able to manage the Office for iPad apps. And using the app management, you can allow set policy for how the apps can interact with your corporate data. So for example, which apps I can copy paste into, where I can save as. So let me go ahead and set up some policies for my Office for iPad apps. So here I'm in the Intune portal in the dashboard, and I can set up my policies here. I'm going to go into my configuration policies and grab those Office for iPad apps. And you see if I go in, I actually can configure and set up what I want to do and what I want to enable with these apps specifically. So I have set here that you can use these apps to transfer data to other managed apps. So only managed apps can transfer data to other managed apps. And very specifically, with cut, copy, paste, I'll let people paste in content as long as it's a managed app. So that way I make sure that people are only using these in the right way. Well, then I can also manage the deployment of these managed apps as well. So if I go in here to my managed software, you see here is where I have those Office for iPad apps with the policy embedded into it, and I can actually manage the deployment right from here. It goes into the My Portal app that my users can access from all their devices, and they can get these wrapped apps onto their iPad devices. Now, this is similar to what Joe showed that's natively built right into Windows 10. Well, with the Office for iPad apps, you use Intune to get that policy embedded and out to the iPad. So let's actually switch over and take a look at what that looks like for the user once they have these Office for iPad apps with the policies embedded right in. So I'm going to get my iPad here. I'm going to go into my Outlook app, which is a managed app. So I have prompted from my PIN, of course, so I can access it. And in here, I have an email from Michael that is an Excel attachment. So I want to open that Excel attachment. And when I go to open in, you see that I only get Excel, because that's the only managed app that I have on this device. It's not showing me other apps that I'm not allowed to use, so I, as a user, don't get in trouble and put this in a different app. It only shows me what I'm allowed to use. So let me enter my PIN in there, and we can get going. Again, prompting me for security because this is a managed app, and I know that as a user experience. So I'm going to go ahead and get in here. All right. So here's my Excel table, and I want to copy some data from this and put it in another document. So let me grab this. Nice big touch handles there, and I'm going to copy that. Now, I'm going to try and paste this into my unmanaged app, an unmanaged email app, the native app on the client that I use for personal reasons. And I'll go ahead and tap in here. And you see when I do that, there's no paste option, because this is not a managed app. I cannot paste into it. Intune's managed that for me, so I don't get in trouble. But if I go into Word, which is a managed app, and I tap in here, I can see that there is that paste option, and I can drop the table in just like that because it's a managed app. So as a great user experience, make sure that I stay right where I should and keeps the data safe across all of those managed apps. Now, that showed you how Intune capabilities enable that app and management policy with the new mobile application management. But while I'm sitting here on my iPad talking about Office, I also want to mention that we just released a fantastic new Office 365 SDK for iOS. So now it's really easy to build iPad apps that connect to the data sitting in Office 365 in a great new way. And if you want to learn more about that, check out the Developer Foundation session. All right, so let's talk more about Office 365, security and protection. And when you go to Office 365, you get the benefits of how we run our cloud service, things like ISO 27001, or the support for EU model clauses, or importantly and very recently, Article 29, working party approval for privacy. And Microsoft is the only global public cloud provider that has been approved by the Pan-European Data Processing Authority for this. And just one of many examples of how we're staying on the very front edge of security and compliance controls with our cloud service. And last but not least, of course, your data in Office 365 is fully encrypted at rest, so you have that assurance as well. But it's not just about the capabilities that come in the service, it's also about the security settings we give you to customize and use based on your unique business requirements. And one key aspect of security is data loss prevention, or DLP. And DLP enables you to protect your sensitive business information. But it does this in 365 in a way that your user always understands what's happening, so they don't confuse or get frustrated, or worse, try and work around you. They know what's happening. So let me show you what that looks like in Office 365. So here, I'm now in my Office 365 admin console in my reports view. So I have reports across all parts of the service, including what's going on from a data loss prevention policy. So I can see which rules I have and what's happening. So let me pull up a report that shows the different policies. And here's reporting of this policy actually is getting hit. You see this is overrides on a certain email policy. And I see that actually there's a lot of overrides happening. And I might not love that. I might want some additional security. So I'm going to go actually and add some additional security to this particular DLP policy. So I'll go into, in this case, Exchange, since it's an email rule specifically set up. And I can manage all aspects of my Exchange Online experience here, including here my data loss prevention. So I'll go into that. And here I have my different DLP policies set up. And I notice this one, credit card. So it's scanning and looking for credit card information. And this one is what's getting hit and overridden 14 times. So I want to maybe take some additional actions, because a lot of people are overriding. I want to put some additional security measures in place. So let me go into that rule. And in this case, it's people sending internally. So I'll select that one. And within the DLP area, you can see I have my rules set up, but I want to add an additional action. So if people are overriding, I'll give it some more security. So I'm going to go ahead and add some message security here, and I'll apply rights protection. Add that as well. And there's some RMS templates, rights management templates here. I'm going to go ahead and choose the do not forward. So if people do choose to override, they can't forward it. The information can't get shared farther than that. So I'll go ahead and save that rule and get that set up. And you can see that I also have different workflows. So if someone overrides, it's automatically sent to some people in the organization. So I can set up different policies and pretty sophisticated things within my DLP rules. All right, so I've got that set up. So I'm going to actually flip over to the end user experience so you can see what that looks like. Again, really important to make sure the end user knows what's happening so they don't try and work around what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new email and send this to Steve here. And I'm going to copy myself so you can see what it looks like when you get it. And I'll attach this file with some information in it, the customer info. And you see, as I'm typing, well before I hit send, I'm getting prompted as a user that something's happening. I get this policy tip here, and it's hovering over, and it shows that there's credit card numbers. So I know what's going on and why I'm getting this rule. And I see I'm given the choice to override. So I'll go ahead and choose override, and I'm going to send that. Now, when I send that, both the message and the attachment is getting encrypted, and the rights management policy, that do not forward policy, is being attached to the message. And that way I make sure that the protection always stays with the content. So let me open that, and you can see that I get the policy here. Actually, let me open this one, give you an example. The policy here, it says do not forward, can't print, can't content. Even my Windows snippet tool won't work when I have that email open because it's got that additional RMS policy attached to it. All right, and so the same experience, both the admin experience as well as the end user, getting that policy tip, seeing what happens, that is what's extending now beyond just email into all the content that's going into SharePoint Online as well as OneDrive for Business. And in case you missed it yesterday, OneDrive for Business, unlimited storage, so a lot more content going in there. So we want to make sure you have all the right policies so your sensitive information, email, and content is protected. Now, so what I showed you today is security and management across identity, devices, apps, and data. And that's using Azure Active Directory, Intune, and Office 365 to provide you the security you need while making sure your users have a great enterprise productivity experience. Thanks.